Okay, could we begin seated down? Okay, could people take their seats, please? Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone and packed house around the table. But it's great for us to be together as two boards in person. I think this is the first time since, is it 2019? Which is a long time ago. I think that meeting kicked off all the work that we did on PI and enlisted entities afterwards. And we're still doing, of course, some more work on the IAASB side from that. And it's great to be joined by Gabriella and for me, all our IAASB colleagues. So welcome. I'm just sort of thinking about 4 years ago, there was a sense that the two boards needed to do more together. And I think our slides today will definitely show that, and you probably feel it, the huge uptick in coordination and activity since then. And I think it's more appropriate now than ever to focus on this because we're with the monitoring group recommendations well on track to be implemented, and us under this new foundation that we are really working hand in hand, not just on our work programs, but to build stronger organization together. And really the goal today in my mind is to find areas for coordination, interconnections, opportunities, risks that if we're not aware of, that we may fail to take advantage of or to address and mitigate beforehand. And there's no better two places than our strategy and work plan, where the timetables are now meant to coincide, and our sustainability work, which is clearly front and center of everyone's attention these days. So today, Gabrielle and I will give you a little bit of an introduction. We're going to be helped out, of course, like we always are, by our technical directors, and Jeff's gonna help us as well. And we hope for a really good discussion, and let's be a little bit creative here about trying to find those interconnections and the potential to leverage each other's works to make the public interest better served. Gabriella, should I turn it over to you? We can flip some of the slides. We have two very nice pictures up here. I think that was the most important reason we have this slide up. Photoshop could do wonders and make me even look good at time to time. But Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Tom. And first of all, good morning to everybody. It's of course wonderful to have the opportunity to have this joint session of the two boards, to meet some of the IAASB board members that I did not know and that hadn't not met in person, and of course to take these 2 hours to reinforce our collaboration and cooperation, and to ask for the board members to provide all the comments and the contributions that they may in respect to the way we should take this coordination forward. So yes, the photos are what they are, not much to say about it, but it's just to say that we are working together and then alongside the effort that is being done by the staff to coordinate in a very close way. Tom and I have also been coordinating, speaking, agreeing to disagree, and etc. Sometimes at unsocial hours and not at the most formal, in the most formal ways. But anyway, it's how we want to advance this collaboration and this common project, and that's how we see it. So if we move to the next slide. Yeah, this is a little bit about what success looks like for these two boards. We can't go alone, separated. We will not achieve what we need to achieve, and what we need to achieve is impact. Impact in the sense, not in the sense of being known and famous, which we don't necessarily like, but impact in the sense of bringing our project to make a difference in society, in the community, in economies, etc. That's what how success looks like, and this takes us to work together and to work together in a very agile way. We will discuss today our strategy and work plans for the next cycle. But it's important, and I will repeat this as many times as necessary, that we both remain agile and able, both boards remain agile and able to respond to any unexpected and new challenges that the next 4 years may bring us. And it's more than possible that this happens. Looking back to the last 4 years, who would say that we would have a pandemic, war, and other happenings that really forced us to move our direction a little bit. So this is how we want to work, having a clear plan and objectives, but working together to identify new sources of challenge and new areas where these two boards may be called to respond. Everything that we do is focused on meeting public interest objectives, and that's what we have been trying also to do at all times, testing our options, solutions, decisions, and strategic directions against what the public interest asks from us. There are some sources of challenge for the next years also with respect to more institutional, at a more institutional level. The transition to the foundation, of course, is requiring some work and some attention, to say the least, from our side, Tom and I. But of course, this should also be, this should also bring the boards and different and new capacity to meet these objectives. Namely, we are very focused on reinforcing the staff and staff resources, and hiring people, reinforcing the staff in terms that we can, the staff can respond to the new requirements coming from this staff-led model or staff-based model that we are going to. Of course, like any transition, this brings questions, this brings sometimes some perplexities that we are trying to overcome with continued dialogue and collaboration and transparency to make sure that we navigate these shaky waters of the transition, or a bit shaky waters in the direction of a successful outcome. We are also holding, both of us, constructive dialogue with PIOB and the monitoring group, of course, with respect to our projects and everything we do, but also in respect to the support that we need from our stakeholders, and mostly from the stakeholders within this ecosystem of the foundation, to support the efforts that we are doing to make this reform successful. And lastly, but not least, of course, we are continuing to have a close and strong link with IFAC, which is under this project of transitioning to a new model, providing us services under a service level agreement that we have agreed with IFAC. So this collaboration also continues, of course, and will be there for all times and for all the reasons. And with this, I'll pass to Tom for the next slide.
Yeah, if you flip the slide. So, just to highlight, as I said, we've made significant efforts to coordinate on a number of key projects. And on this slide, you see that where the touch points have led to positive results. So QM had a lot of impacts across borders, group audits. I think there's also some discussions about how to support implementation of our work and engagement team group. Listed entity PI, we're very much committed to our track 2 project, and audits of LCE will obviously has benefited from our dialogue with the IAASB team. There's a lot of also going on: sustainability, use of experts, fraud, going concern, audit evidence, technology. One of the things that when I was interviewing for the job, the monitoring group reforms were being discussed, and there was some talk about the role of the 2 boards and whether there should be 1 board. But I think we wanted to prove that actually 2 boards makes a lot of sense, and that if you can make them work well together, you get a more positive outcome. And I think that's what we're trying to do and demonstrate, and we're doing a pretty good job at it right now. But we're always in a world of trying to be continuous improvement. So today is really about remaining alert to the emerging or unanticipated developments in the environment. We can't anticipate things that are unknown, but we could be structured in such a way and culturally prepared to act in an agile manner when things do arise. And I think there is a lot of goodwill that has been built up between the 2 boards over the last few years, and it's for us to act. And I think the strategy, work plan, and sustainability offers us 2 real good test case for that. So we're going to turn to the strategy and work plan. I think Gabriella is going to introduce sort of the question we want to have you think about, and then Billy is going to, and Jeff, Billy, and Ken are going to help us on some of the topics, and then we'll invite conversation.
Yes, right. Thank you, Tom. Essentially, this session will be focused on what we think are the 2 main topics for collaboration and opportunities for collaboration between the 2 boards, which is the strategy and work plan of each board, and the sustainability projects. This is, of course, without prejudice to any other thing that the board members may want to raise after this discussion, and that they think that it's necessary to address. But our proposal and suggestion is that, at least for the first part of the session, we address these 2 topics. And the strategy and work plan is actually a strategic topic for us in terms of coordination. We have heard from our stakeholders. We have a call for better and even more intense coordination with respect to our strategy and work plans in 2 senses. One, to make sure that all the opportunities and projects and work streams that we identify as being relevant are coordinated upfront between the 2 boards in terms of identifying what is necessary in terms of coordination, what are the impacts that one project may have on the other board, what does it take, not only in terms of substance, but also in terms of resources, allocation, timelines, etc. Secondly, our stakeholders are calling us to be also coordinated with respect to the projects that we are undertaking, deadlines, etc., which does not mean that we have to be the same. It just means that this has to be meaningful and agile also for the stakeholders. So this is the effort that we are making. This, I think it's the first time I'm new, relatively new still in this world, but I think that this is the first time that the two strategy and work plan cycles will be fully aligned. Correct me, Tom, if I'm wrong. And this is also a step forward in direction of what our stakeholders have been asking us. So next slide, please. We will, for the time being, keep sustainability aside because we know it's currently the most relevant area of coordination between the two boards. So we will speak about that in the second part of the slides. But setting aside the current focus on sustainability, what we would like to listen and know from the board members, would be if you have suggestions, if you have identified any significant issues or any significant drivers which are of relevance for the two boards to achieve what are our strategic goals in the next strategic period. This is an exercise with you all to make sure that on top of what the staff and ourselves have been doing to identify these possible sources of overlap, complementarity, etc., that we get the input from the board in that respect so that we can address that in an appropriate way since now as we are designing the plan for the next cycle. So we would ask the board members now to come and tell us which are the opportunities for coordination and linkages, etc., in this period. And for that, I think that now I will pass the floor to our technical directors who will present some, I think, supporting materials that may help you identify these possible sources and topics for coordination.
Jeff's gonna.
Thank you, Gabrielle and Tom. Next slide, please, and good morning, everybody. Great to see everyone. Yes, so we're going to spend the next few slides that you already have received just to give you a little bit more of a highlight of the input that we have received to our respective consultation papers. In terms of timeline, of course, we both released our consultation papers in the first part of the year, and we're pretty much lined up now. And so we, of course, looking at finalizing our respective SWPs at end of this year. What is not on that timeline, perhaps I would say that whilst the two boards did not get a chance to meet last year, the two boards planning committees did meet last year, particularly to talk about the SWP back in October last year. And it was a very fruitful and robust discussion. We highlighted, of course, the importance of sustainability, but there's also a recognition that the two boards, in terms of the coordination are really, we need to coordinate at a strategic level, which is what we're all doing now. And the staff and the teams have worked hard together to look at the two SWPs as well, to make sure, there are any points that we need to address together. And then the second, we need to coordinate at a technical project level, which we have been doing really well over the last few years. And of course, as we continue to improve on those and be more efficient and effective, and also coordinate at an operational level so we can sort of improve our efficiencies. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to pass to Willie and Ken, and they're going to give us a bit more of an insight of the comments that we have received to our respective consultation papers.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. It's very nice to have the two boards around the same table again for the first time since 2019. So, Michelle, next slide. So on this slide, I just wanted to provide you with a high-level overview of the responses that we received to our strategy and work plan consultation. Our board had the opportunity on Tuesday to discuss this in a fair amount of detail, but I will stay at a very high level for purposes of this discussion. So I think generally we received a lot of support for our strategy and work plan. With the suggestions that we received, we did make some adjustments to our goal and some of our strategic drivers and strategic actions. And I think on the work plan element side, we did ask our respondents that going forward, we see that we will focus on, we will have two main focus areas, audits and reviews, and sustainability and other assurance engagements. And I think that resonated with our stakeholders, and we will retain that. However, there was calls that we need to give it a bit of an indication in terms of how much time and resources will be allocated to each. So we are proposing an estimate of around 70% on audits and reviews and around 30% on sustainability and other assurance engagements. I think in both consultations, there were questions about coordination with the other board, and Jeff will talk about that a little bit later. In terms of the projects that we propose to our stakeholders as candidate topics, again, a lot of support for those topics. I think only one topic based on the qualifying criteria that we used will not qualify to come onto the work plan, and that's joint audits. One topic that really came to the fore quite prominently was the focus on the impact of technology and the call that the IAASB should adopt a more strategic and broadly considered approach in terms of addressing technology in our standards. There was also a call for a focus on post-implementation reviews, which we all know provides a very important source in terms of have we achieved our objectives and what further changes may be needed. Very strong support for a bespoke suite of standards on sustainability assurance, but also caution to say there's a need to allow for sufficient time for ISA 5000 to be implemented in the first instance. But we do need to remain flexible because, as we know, this is a rapidly evolving area, and if there's a need for us to be able, a need for us to respond to issues that arise, that we should be able to allocate resources to any additional projects. Also support for updating our EER guidance as complementary to the ISA 5000 standard, and then assurance on XBRL sufficient to qualify as a project, but relative to the other projects ranked as a low priority. So that is sort of just a very high level overview, and I'll turn over to Ken now.
Thank you very much, Willie and Michelle. Thank you. Next slide. So in terms of what we've heard on our strategy and work plan consultation paper from our respondents, generally, I would say whatever Willie has just shared, there is commonality in terms of the feedback we've received at a high level on some of the important considerations stakeholders have in mind whenever they think about the work that our board is doing. First of all, in terms of the way we had articulated our strategic drivers and themes from an ethics and independence perspective, generate broad understanding and broad support in terms of the direction we've painted from our environmental scan and analysis. As Willie said as well, on the ethics side, generally very broad support on the work we're doing on sustainability, and it is a two-pronged project, looking first of all at independence, ethics and independence standards for sustainability assurance, and on the other side, looking at ethics standards for sustainability reporting. There was a suggestion also for consideration of what should be the approach, if at all, IAASB might take in looking at ethical considerations relative to preparers who are not professional accountants, because our code is a code that contains high quality ethical provisions for professional accountants on the preparer side. And many stakeholders have recognized that there is a bit of an imbalance in terms of what is expected of professional accountants in business on the preparer side relative to those who are undertaking similar professional activities but are not subject to similar ethical expectations or requirements. We had comment letters from two monitoring group respondents, IOSCO and AFER. They continued to emphasize to IAASB not to let the foot off the gas pedal, so to speak, and to continue to have a laser focus on enhancing the quality and clarity of the code, especially in the area of audit independence. But on the other side, we also heard from our other stakeholders a concern to make sure that if we're going to embark on a project to develop standards, to make sure we really have a sound basis to go forward with the project, and therefore undertaking the necessary evidence gathering to support the project. There was also a strong call from a few stakeholders for IAASB to look at this issue of firm culture and governance. And by culture, we mean really ethical culture, because culture is a very, very broad topic, as I think we all can appreciate. But that call really came in the context of the persistence of unethical behavior that I think most of us have seen and continue to see in terms of those ethical failures in public practice. And the call is for IAASB to look at this issue as soon as possible. And yesterday we had a very robust discussion at our board. And really there was very strong consensus at IAASB for the board to really tackle this project or this topic as almost kind of a burning platform issue. And that is something that we can touch on a little bit on later on when we talk about potential items. There was also a number of comments that came through highlighting the continued importance of technology and technological developments and looking at it from the ethical perspective, meaning ethics and independence. Even though we have just completed a project looking at technology-related revisions to the code. Like Billy said, also PIRs, post-implementation reviews, a number of stakeholders continue to highlight these as an important part of the board's strategy and work plan. And finally, stakeholder engagement and coordination with others, including IAASB, also continued emphasis from our stakeholders to continue to spend time and continue to be focused on those two prongs of our strategic initiatives. So I'll pass the floor now to Jeff to talk to the next slide.
Thank you, Ken. I'm just going to give you some summary and just key input, I suppose, we've received in terms of our two boards coordination. And of course, we have received comments about coordination with other global standard setters and other standard setters as well, of course. I would say just some overall observations. Of course, these are all very good comments that we have received, and you would note even from there some of the key comments. You know, there are a lot of similarities between the two the comments to the two boards consultation on this topic on SSB coordination. I guess another observation is, you know, some of them are more directing at a strategic levels, whereas others are more directing at perhaps more at a technical level that we need to really engage each other when we get to those projects. The first point you see there in terms of adopting a systematic approach to our coordination efforts on the IAASB side, of course, we are doing that, and that's why we're here, as we mentioned earlier. I think some of the other suggestions, like aligning our project timelines and effective dates, aligning definitions as closely as possible. I think these are all very good suggestions that we do need to look at and really need to listen to some of our stakeholders in terms of when they do adopt, particularly from an adoption and implementation perspective, you know, what would be more effective and efficient for our stakeholders. If you go down the list a little bit more on leveraging joint outreach activities, and you see the same comments on both sides, we have been doing that, and I would perhaps point to you know, our sustainability project. Early in the year, when IAASB had our roundtable discussions, we invited IAASB representatives to come and share with with the participants, the IAASB sustainability projects, and of course, equally, as IAASB now is having its roundtables, you have invited us to have IAASB representation in these roundtables as well, and it is really important. So our stakeholders can see how these projects are working together, and so we can perhaps consider, so they can perhaps consider some of these issues in a more holistic way. And of course, the last one, opportunities for joint and complementary actions and broadening coordinations efforts to other international standard setters. Again, I think these are very good suggestions that we will take on board, and we will continue to think about these issues as we work through the next strategy period, which we are going to get to now. So Willie and Ken is going to talk through some of the opportunities going forward for coordination.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So if you could move to the next slide, Michelle. Yeah, I'll start first, and Willie will come after me in terms of the ongoing projects. The 3 items you see on the slide here, well, the first 2, our colleagues on IAASB will be generally familiar with them. Sustainability, certainly everybody knows that there's a lot of work that is already happening on the coordination front. At basically all the levels, whether it's the chair level, the task force level, staff level. And I won't say too much there because we're going to come back to that in the second half of our conversation. Use of expert, it is a project that is ongoing. It is already underway. In fact, Laurie on my right chairs that project. And we will be having a discussion on this project, in fact, on our board agenda later this morning. But this project came about because a number of questions had been raised in terms of what the independence expectations ought to be relative to the use of experts, first of all, in an audit / assurance context, and also looking at it a bit more holistically on the preparer side, when PAs, accountants, professional accountants make use of experts. The question arose particularly in the context of our project on group audits, engagement in group audits, when we looked at the different categories of individuals who could be part of, first of all, the engagement team, and secondly, the audit or the assurance team. So it's a bit of a technical issue, but we're looking at it from the independence perspective, the objectivity perspective, and really finding what is endeavoring to find a way that's going to respond to the public interest questions that have been raised relative to, again, those expectations for independence in quotes, versus making sure that those provisions are going to be implementable and operable. The third item there, collective investment vehicles, CIVs, and pension funds, as well as investment company complexes. This topic arose in the context of our PI project, when our board looked at revising the definition of a public interest entity. Our board went out, first of all, with a proposal to include CIVs, pension funds, as part of our mandatory categories of PIs. But we heard back from our respondents, from stakeholders who really were a bit concerned about the potential burden of including that category in our mandatory list, because of the diversity of collective investment vehicles and pension funds as well around the world, and what sort of burden that would place on national standard setters in implementing that PI definition if it were to include collective investment vehicles. So what our board committed to do was to look at the topic of CIVs and pension funds separately as a separate project, and look at it holistically. And really what we're trying to understand here is what the independence considerations ought to be when we think about an entity like a collective investment vehicle that doesn't operate in the way we would normally understand an entity in business to be operating, meaning it has a management team, it has a board of directors, it has employees, etc. And it's all a kind of one self-contained unit. Whereas in a collective investment vehicle situation, you take a mutual fund, for example, well, it's got different parties who are involved. You have the trustees, you have the managers, you have the advisors, and and how do they work together? What are the interactions? What are the relationships? And how do we look at those relationships from an independence perspective? The topic of investment company complexes is related, but it is slightly different in the sense that this is more thinking about concepts like hedge funds and private equity funds, and even potentially sovereign wealth funds. You know, these are complexes, investment company complexes. And when we look at this in the context of the audit and as well as independence, how should we look at those? Well, from the IASB perspective, is going to be looking at the independence issues. How do we look at those relationships within that complex from a related entity perspective in terms of our definition of a related entity? Because from the code perspective, we look at it through the lens of related entities. So I'll pause here and I'll maybe pass it over to Vili to take us through the items on the IAASB.
Thank you, Ken. And similarly to the IAASB, on our side, we obviously have also a number of projects that we will be carrying into the new strategy period, and that will be ongoing at the beginning of 2024. I think sustainability speaks for itself. And I think all four the other projects that we have listed there in terms of our current work plan are fairly mature in terms of the level of coordination that has already taken place. Because on ISA 500 and going concern, those have both already been exposed. So there was obviously a high level of coordination going into the exposure drafts, and we are busy processing the comments now on those two. And we expect that the coordination will obviously be ongoing. Similarly, for the last two projects listed there, listed entity and PI, we are continuing with our track 2 of our project. We aim to approve that at the December meeting, again, exposure draft. And as you know, we have a correspondent member from the ethics board on our working group. And on fraud, there's been an extensive level of coordination in terms of the fraud project, especially in Q2. And we will continue to run any changes that we've made to the fraud standard based on the discussions we had this week. We will run past the IAASB staff again before we again go for approval of the exposure draft in December. I'll then continue to the next column, the next table as well, where we wanted to focus a little bit on the selected potential projects. So these are for both IAASB and IAASB, but these are not full lists of the potential projects that will go onto the work plan. Because we were anticipating that both boards were going to have a discussion this week, but we selected the ones that we felt were very prominent on either side. So on the IAASB side, we do anticipate that we will have a project or projects relating to technology and other modernizations. And we have decided in our discussion on Tuesday that we will pursue a more integrated approach to address technology and other modernizations in terms of a project with multiple work streams that will include our current audit evidence project on revising ISA 500, because there was quite a bit of overlap between the comments that we received on our strategy and work plan as well as on the audit evidence standard. And the other work stream will relate to revisions to more of the performance standards. As you know, ISA 500 is a very foundational standard in terms of audit evidence. And then we will pursue revisions to some of the prominent performance standards, especially from focus on technology as well, in terms of ISA 330 and some targeted standards in the ISA 500 series. Another topic that came out as quite prominent is a project to revise ISA 320, the standard on materiality. There were feedback that we received in terms of concerns around the consistency of application of the standard, in terms of judgments being made, and that judgments may be different between auditors in similar circumstances. So when applied by different auditors in similar circumstances, and within the concern, especially from the regulatory community, that this leads to a diversity in work effort because based on your materiality, that has a big impact on the nature, extent and timing of your audit procedures. And then also calls that in that project, there needs to be a focus on both the quantitative and qualitative considerations of materiality. It was also pointed out during our CAG meeting last week that that project has a very strong link to the sustainability project as well. And we have seen, even in the outreach that we've had up to date and in the roundtable yesterday, that materiality is a topic that keeps on coming up, even from a sustainability point of view. And then the last topic for purposes of this discussion that we've listed there is reviews of interim financial information. That's our standard ISRE 2410. Again, a lot of support for undertaking a project there. Respondents felt strongly that, this is an everyday use standard in certain jurisdictions. It's used for entities that have strong public interests, where there's significant public interest. And respondents felt that in order to uphold the legitimacy of that standard, we need to do a project now. Maybe for our IAASB colleagues, just to highlight that this is one of our standards that's still in the pre-clarity format and has not been updated for many, many years. And there were also concerns from respondents that the standard is not technically consistent anymore with standards like ISRE 2400 on limited assurance and ISA 3000. So a strong steer for us there to undertake a project on 2410. So Ken, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Vili. Looking at the potential projects or work streams on the IAASB side, yesterday our board had a discussion about those items, but also a broader discussion about what ought to really be the areas of strategic focus on our board's agenda for the next 4 to 5 years. But let's look at the issue of firm culture and governance first. Just a bit of context first. Back in early July, our board issued a statement on the importance of ethical behavior for all professional accountants, especially those in public practice. And that was in the context of the issue I mentioned earlier, which is persistence of unethical behavior in firms and the element of urgency in addressing that sort of issue in the public interest. Following on from our board's issuance of the public statement, the Global Accounting Alliance came out also with a public statement in August, also emphasizing the importance of ethical behavior for all professional accountants. And that's essentially signals really that this is has become a burning platform issue, as I mentioned earlier. And that is what our board sort of discussed yesterday. And there was really strong consensus around the table for IAASB to look at this issue, to really do the appropriate research, the analysis of what might be some of the root causes, and really making an assessment and analysis as to whether there needs to be anything done within the code to deal with the issue of firm culture, and really to bring it to the forefront of what firms think about as they pursue their business. It is a leadership issue because culture at the end of the day is directly connected to the tone at the top. And the code, as it stands today, does speak, I would say, relatively briefly on the issue of culture and the issue of leadership, but is there more that needs to be done? And that is really what this is about. It is going to be a work stream. There's no conclusion as to whether it's going to be a project, but IAASB is going to look at this fairly extensively through the research, through stakeholder engagement, and also look at the related topic of governance and how culture connects with governance and what role governance can play in bringing about a stronger ethical culture within firms. The other topic that our board talked about is the issue of the role of CFOs and other senior PIBs. This topic is really starting from the professional accountant side, looking at the evolving role and responsibilities of CFOs and senior PIBs. And as we all appreciate, CFOs really are under are operating in a very fast-moving environment, especially with sustainability. It's really no longer a role that is primarily focused on financial reporting. That continues to be important, but they are pivoting. They have to pivot towards really understanding what's happening on the sustainability reporting side, and they have to bring it all together, because that's what they are called to do. They are at the center of it. And as we think about the evolving nature of their role, how are they themselves changing from a sort of mindset perspective, from a competence perspective, and as they work across disciplines, as they look at kind of issues in a more sort of integrated way, and not to complicate things, but they also have to deal with all issues of technology. And they have to deal with cybersecurity, cyber risk, cyber crime. They have to bring technology into the mix as well. So that is an issue that we have agreed needs to be looked at. It is not an independent issue per se. It is looking at the ethics provisions. But related to this issue is the matter I mentioned earlier, which is about what we heard from our stakeholders on our consultation paper. And many stakeholders said, well, yes, if PIBs are going to have very high expectations of ethical behavior, what about individuals who operate in similar roles, perform similar activities, but yet are not subject to an equivalent bar of ethical standards? And that also was a topic that generated strong discussion on our board yesterday. It is an issue that our board agreed would need to be addressed as a strategic issue as well. So that is going to be a focus of IAASB as we move into the finalization of our strategy and work plan in the fourth quarter in terms of how we articulate that strategy. The third item, business relationships, that is a topic that our board has identified as part of the consultation process. This topic is really looking at the concept of a business relationship. It is not defined in our code. It is described for examples, which is kind of a funny way to do it, if I can put it that way. But it is a section in our code that has been long-standing, and it needs to be looked at again in the context of how firms have evolved in terms of how they engage with their clients from a business standpoint. It is not just about whether they are undertaking joint ventures with their clients, but it is really looking at any and all commercial arrangements they might have with their clients. And how do we then define a business relationship in that context, and how do we look at it from an independence perspective? And the final item, audit firm, audit client relationship. It was teed up as a holistic look at the precisely that relationship between the firm and the audit client from an independence perspective. But a very specific question that our board will be looking at is whether within the code we ought to change the concept of an audit client to put the right focus on who the auditor is serving, because audit client very often is perceived to be referring to management or the board of directors of the entity. And is that really the message you want to get across in the code? So if there is going to be a very specific question that will be addressed as part of that question, it is that question. Should we change the concept of audit client and call it something else? So I will pause here. Maybe I'll pause it to Gabriela then to tee up the questions for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff, Billy, and Ken, for this detailed presentation. I'm not going to add anything because now it's time to listen to you. So I'd open here the floor for any comments, suggestions, questions that the two boards may have. Christelle, please.
Thank you. During the presentation, I did not quite understand if it was already organized, the coordination on the technology side, but on what we call the the upstream work that we do on observing what's happening and to what extent it can impact our work, I think it should be common. So if it's not already, this is a source of synergies, I would say.
Thank you, Christelle. This is mostly to identify topics for coordination, but what I would say, and I'll ask the staff to directors to add anything to this. I think that this is being coordinated as needed as we go. The IAASB has currently a working group that is monitoring the developments, not exactly a project or whatsoever, but of course, if anything comes to our attention through the working group or the EA, IOC, etc., that needs to be coordinated, of course, this will be done and is being done. Thank you.
Gabriella, I can maybe just add to that on the IAASB side. We have a technology consultation group, and there is coordination at the level of that group and the staff level with the ethics board. And we have even in our feedback that our board discussed on, I think it was Tuesday, on ED 500, we've already recognized that we need to have a closer look at the completed technology work that ethics has done, as well as your ongoing work. So we are very conscious that technology is also going to have a very key effect in terms of the new projects that we're going to take on. So I think that will certainly be an area of coordination.
Thank you, Billy. Eric Turner, please.
Thanks very much. The thing that I've encountered a lot over the years as new standards are issued by the auditing board is the need to communicate with management and those charged with governance about the implications of a new auditing standard. And as I was listening to a lot of the work here, it occurred to me that there may be some linkages with the ethical standards for both the auditors and management and those charged with governance as new standards are issued. And I wondered if there was an opportunity for the two boards to work together, say, for example, when the new fraud standard is issued, whether there's something that could be done on a joint basis to talk about what are the ethical standards from a management perspective related to fraud, and how that might impact the new auditing standard and how auditors are going to be working under that new standard. It just seemed to me that that might be helpful in the public interest for everyone to kind of understand their roles in dealing with, say, fraud or that kind of thing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. On our side, let me just tell you that the communication with those charged with governance is one of the topics that was on our consultation paper, and it's on our radar. We will see how we will address it, but this can be possibly a way of addressing the topic in coordination with you. Can you want to?
Just a very quick reaction to Eric's suggestion, which I think is excellent. Precisely in the context of our discussion at our board yesterday, we talked about this issue of potentially enlarging the scope of the code beyond professional accountants. And we have that vision, but how do we get there? Well, before we can even get there, we have to make sure that those we are targeting actually understand what the standards are about. And when we think about management, they are not all professional accountants. Management is a very heterogeneous group that comprises both accountants and non-accountants. And yes, I can easily see as you're raising awareness about what's changed from an ISA 240 perspective, let's make sure they also understand the ethical expectations from an ISBA code perspective. That's a very good suggestion.
Thank you, Ken. Mark Babington, please.
Thank you. It's very clear from the presentations that we've received that both boards have done a lot, and both boards are very ambitious to do a lot more. One of the things that strikes me as a difference between these boards and, say, the IASB and the ISSB is they invest a lot of their resource in implementation support. Do you think there is a scope for both boards to perhaps copy that, particularly because there have been such significant changes and there are some really big items on the forward programme? And do you think it would also be a good way of further embedding coordination and cooperation between the boards on explaining not just how an individual standard works, but how it fits into the whole package of auditing assurance and ethical standards that we need the profession to use effectively?
Mark, that's a good point. The real issue as it relates to implementation guide is one of prioritization and resources. A commitment, having set up a lot of the educational programs at the IFRS Foundation, is we made a very significant investment, monetary investment, and you know, if we're thinking about where we put our resources currently, like the focus has really been on rebuilding the staff complement. So I think it's a really good question to ask. Is there demand in the marketplace and value to do that? Would we shift resources for that? If you have no expansion of resources, do you take from one to give to another? Or do we need to have incremental resources that would support such a regime? And I think those are all good points. Our basic assumption, though, during this strategy process is that our resources, financial resources, are on a steady climb, thanks to the generous support and maybe some incremental support, but not a step change difference.
Thank you very much. Diane, please.
Thank you. And thanks, first of all, for the opportunity to get together and have this discussion. I want to carry on a bit of what Eric said. And Eric, I think, had a great solution. What I was struggling with when I looked at the blue box, lower right-hand corner, all four of those I found quite interesting. And when you think about the relationship that auditors have with CFOs and audit committees, it's critically important, right? Do we understand each other? Can we work through things together? I think, Ken, your comment about do they understand their ethical responsibilities, and I was struggling with how would you work through that, and I think Eric's solution might be an eloquent way to remind folks about that. But I really want to echo and offer my support for your revisiting the role of the CFO. I think their role is changing, their skill set is changing, what they need to understand, how they work within the silos of their organization. I think interesting discussion about an audit client and what that means. And when I come back to us, I think a bit about client continuance and how we think through the conditions that may influence our decision to continue a relationship or to part ways. And I do think that's, although not on our agenda, Willie, I do think this is an important aspect of what drives audit quality is, are you working with the right folks and are those relationships where they need to be? So just want to offer my support for those items. I thought they're quite on point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Diane. And if we think a little bit about it, all of them are related. So that's also why we are still thinking how to address these topics, but because it may happen that they are not addressed in a separated projects. We don't know. There are strong links between them. Thank you for that. Edo, please.
Yes, thank you, Gabrielle. It was discussed earlier on where in the context of the listed entity and PI project where we used correspondent board members. It strikes me that we may could have benefited from such thinking on other projects as well. So, for example, when we talk about group audits, and maybe there's some other projects that we may want to have a more active consideration whether that's going to be useful or not, because I think it is on certain of these projects, and something for both boards to keep in mind as we develop our projects, whether we should or should not have correspondent board member involved. Thank you.
I think it's a good point to take forward. Thank you very much for that note. Well, so yeah, Wendy, please.
Thank you. First, I want to say I really appreciate the presentation and getting together. Since this is my third year on the board and this has never happened, it's quite exciting. So I feel like we're getting into question 2 a little bit, but I wanted to chime in because some of my answers in 2 have already been brought up a little bit. And what comes to mind is I'm still seeing silos, although Edo talked about correspondence. I liked Eric's idea, which really focused on doing something jointly or together. And I like to focus on words. And so I want to move from coordination to integration, if that's possible. And is a correspondent member really the right answer? Should we be doing joint task forces? Which I think might be more efficient, and the need for speed, as well as perhaps when we think about not having enough resources, might help in that area as well. And I'll probably chime in again on question 2 for opportunities in the future to do things jointly to get the messages out.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And we noted again. Any other comments, suggestions, questions? Well, if not, thank you very much for these comments. That of course we will take on board and discuss further between the 2 boards and the staffs and chairs. Trying to make this coordination possibly evolving into an integration as suggested, taking it in a very serious way and to make the best out of it. If there are no other comments, I would give the floor to Tom now to move, and we move to the next topic in our agenda.
So just on Wendy, that last point, one of the things that's very much that's on our mind too is the way we're working and under the new foundation structure, and also this move towards more staff directed. We have to figure out a new term for it. Staff led, we all know what it means, but obviously the board makes the decisions on projects. But if we're moving to more of a world where staff is driving content and task forces, as we know, are sort of morphing into something else, it may change the way that the 2 staffs work together as they develop a project. So thinking about more coordination between that, and actually probably would reduce some of the bureaucratic elements for coordination or integration, as you would like us to term. So just a thought on my mind, and just put it in context, which both boards are very much focused on the role of staff and the development of projects going forward.
I think that James wants to say something.
Yeah, I just, well, first of all, thank you everyone for your contributions. If this is the start, and I would say this is the start of how we should be thinking and talking to each other. I think when we're looking at our projects over time, and I mean relatively soon, starting next year, we will be challenged by our new Stakeholder Advisory Council, which is a joint group, which will be looking at audit and ethics, and they'll be providing us strategic advice. And they're going to say, how are you guys complementing each other? If you've got an objective, are you reinforcing this objective? And so I think I underscore the fact that our own narrative and it may not be a technical narrative, but our own narrative in terms of our mandates, our objectives, our outcomes, our impact, as Gabrielle has mentioned. I think if I can encourage that we begin a narrative, our own language, we should be continually incorporating this into our own thinking and when we're engaging with our stakeholders. But I do look forward to our Stakeholder Advisory Council, which will be looking at us in a coordinated or a joint manner. We also continue to meet with our national standard setters. We talk a little bit about guidance, reaching out to management, explaining the impact of audit and ethics in a complementary way. We will be encouraging our national standard setters, our counterparts that are also audit and ethics, but their coordination at the local level. Because I think the voice into management, into the practitioner community, into the investor community should also be coordinated at the local level. Thanks.
Thanks, James. If we could move the slides probably 2 forward. Thank you. So I think everyone's well aware that we're doing a bunch of work on sustainability, and our commitment is highly integrated to both public officials and the general stakeholder community. I feel like as they say, preaching to the choir on this slide, but we talked about this quite a bit in our roundtables yesterday. Or from an IAASB standpoint, our standards are very much premised on a commitment to ethics and independent standards. It is fundamental to the way we've drafted ISA 5000. I think there was unanimous support. Obviously, there was some questions about implementation in our standard yesterday, particularly from non-accounting practitioners. But everything is premised on a foundation of ethics and independent standards, and then the reported and assurance standards go hand in hand. And we continue to very much coordinate as our board with reported standard setters, whether it be the IAASB, GRI, Europe through FRAG, and others on that regard. So, you know, this is something we're all very much committed to. We have no choice but to make sure that our standards work together, and that this foundational element of ethics standards that underpin reported and assurance standards very much remains together. And I know that both the task force, our task forces and your task forces are through different work streams are working together, and that the staff teams are coordinated. And I'm sure between now and the finalization of our standards, there will be some challenging issues, but there is a lot of good intent on our side to resolve them. And so one of the things that we want to do today is identify maybe things that are not immediately apparent, or things that keep you up at night as you think about our pathway to finalization in 2024, what could go right and what could go wrong in producing and meeting our public interest objective. And so what's sort of nice right now, we're at a period of stability from the IAASB standpoint. Our exposure drafts out there, we're out for consultation. Both boards will benefit from the input. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Billy and sort of just to give a brief update on where we stand and what issues are most arising.
Thank you, Tom. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. So just a quick recap in terms of the status of ISA 5000. So we issued the exposure draft on the 2nd of August with a consultation period of 120 days, which will close on December 1. But in that 120-day consultation period, we are undertaking a very comprehensive outreach program that consists of global roundtables, in partnership events at the jurisdictional level, continuing to focus on targeted outreach with certain stakeholders or stakeholder groups or representative groups, leveraging the events of others. We've done a couple of those already, and those are still coming up as well. Up front, we did a lot of awareness raising through the resources that are available on our website. And last week or the week before, we also did 2 global webinars to raise awareness around the standard. So we really want to try and do as broad a consultation as possible. We have also sort of tried to be a little bit innovative in terms of the comment process. We've this time around presented our stakeholders with a response template, encouraging stakeholders to use this response template instead of writing the traditional comment letter, which we hope will assist us with the analysis of the comments when we get them back. We have also facilitated an online survey, which will, for purposes of those stakeholder groups like preparers, those charge of governance, investor and user groups that may not be that familiar with our process and writing comment letters and so on. So we're really trying to cast the net quite wide. In terms of the standard itself, we aim to establish this as a global baseline, in terms of an overarching standard for sustainability assurance engagements, but fully recognizing, and I said earlier that we received a lot of support for the phased approach, that this will not be the end of our standard setting in this area, that we do anticipate that as we move up the maturity curve, there will be a need to develop further standards that build on the overarching standard, and that may have to expand on specific elements of the assurance engagement process or specific elements of the subject matter information. But ISA 5000 at the moment is designed to be applied to all sustainability topics. As we have in our international standards on auditing, it is framework neutral and profession agnostic, which I think is a term that both boards are trying to are using in their projects. We have received quite a lot of feedback on that point, particularly just during yesterday's roundtable. You know, what profession agnostic is, are we achieving it? Is there more that can be done in terms of how the standard addresses matters, the language that's being used, etc. Our standard also addresses both limited and reasonable assurance. And very importantly is based on the fundamental premises of ethical requirements and quality management. I think in terms of an issue that is coming up is people, and especially in the context of the profession agnostic piece, people are struggling with what does it mean to say you have to be applying the code or law, regulation or local requirements that are at least as demanding. People struggle to understand what that means. What is at least as demanding? Who decides what's at least as demanding? So I think that's probably an area that's going to keep us busy in terms of how we move the standard forward after exposure. In terms of technical areas that are starting to come up, materiality, as I mentioned earlier, and also the distinction between the entity's materiality process and the practitioner's application of materiality. That is clearly a topic that is coming up quite often. And then not unexpected, although we think we have done a lot, people are looking for how we've addressed estimates and forward-looking information, and have we done enough? And then the other one that again I think we think we've done enough is the whole concept of value chain information and group or consolidated sustainability information. It was interesting in the one group yesterday, there was sort of an indication that the value chain piece is a bigger concern than the group piece. It seems as if people with the principles can figure out the consolidated information, but it's the value chain piece. As soon as you go outside the boundaries of the organization, that's the issue. How we're going to move forward is December 1, our consultation period will close, so it will be a busy period over December, January, February for us. Targeted approval of the standard is September 2024. We've, in the exposure draft, suggested an implementation period of at least 18 months, with early adoption permitted and encouraged. But obviously, as we know with standard setting projects, the final effective date we can only determine once we see what we get back and how the project unfolds after that. Thank you, Tom.
Right. I think I'm handing it over to Ken now.
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. So next slide, please, Michelle. So on the IASBA side, yes, our board has been very, very busy this week on our sustainability project. We're looking at both assurance and reporting, as Tom spoke with earlier. So it's really looking across the spectrum of assurance and reporting. The top line or the top part of this slide contains some key overarching considerations that I think it's useful to just remind everyone around the table here, and especially our colleagues on IAASB. Just as you are proceeding relative to ISA 5000 profession agnostic standards, that is also the case for the standards we're developing for sustainability assurance, the ethics and independence standards, meaning to say those standards will apply no matter who's doing the assurance work, whether they are auditors or non-auditors. And importantly, those standards will be at the level of the standards that apply to audits of financial statements. So equivalent level for audits will also apply to sustainability assurance engagements. We are going to package and present the new standards for sustainability assurance engagements, both the ethics and the independence components, within a new part 5 that will sit within the code itself. So it's not going to be separated out, but it is going to be contained in the one code. And as I mentioned, applicable to all sustainability assurance practitioners. And on the reporting side, yes, it is going to apply to professional accountants, but the broad issues that our board believes it is crucial to have ethics provisions addressing the reporting side, because this is really where all issues start. It is about really addressing the behaviors of all of those who are involved in preparing the sustainability disclosures or sustainability information. In this first phase, if I can call it that, we are going to address those standards to professional accountants, because IASBA recognizes that this is a broader issue than just looking at professional accountants. And as I mentioned earlier, we understand, we recognize that there are a lot of stakeholders out there who are concerned that the high bar of ethics standards that apply to accountants in business on the preparer side don't also apply to individuals who are performing the same activities on their side. So we're going to look at this as a strategic issue, perhaps in the next phase of our strategy and work plan, in our new strategy and work plan, looking at the applicability of the ethics standards across a preparer landscape. And finally, framework neutral, absolutely, there's global standards, so they won't be tied into any particular reporting framework or assurance framework for that matter. Timeline, we are aiming for finalization of the standards by December 24 next year. But before then, working from there, an exposure draft, hopefully ready for our board's approval by this December. We will have clearly to think about how much of a lead time to give to adoption and implementation. This question has not been debated yet. We're going to have to work out what might be the options. You know, you mentioned 18 months, and maybe that's an issue for coordination between our two boards. So I will pause here and maybe I'll turn it back to Tom.
Okay, great. If you turn aside, we'll get to the discussion. Again, going back to how I set this out is on the first hand, is like, where do you see the opportunities in this work stream, sustainability or future assurance work streams going forward? And what keeps you up at night? Like what will be a hurdle for us to overcome as we're trying to create an integrated package towards the end of 2024? And then to date in this area, are there any lessons that we should be taking to heart that could make our future work even better going forward? So I'd welcome any comments or input. Andy.
Thank you very much. It's just fascinating to hear the issues here today from the IAASB's viewpoint, which are so many of the issues that we were discussing from ours. So that raises just this whole information sharing or integration of our thoughts, just either from a synergistic or just more smart people to be involved with these issues. You know, certainly the focus of IAASB is on assurance, and we have a broader to deal with assurance and with other aspects. But the things that really concern me are some of the ones brought up about the premise of the quality management and the questions that you asked about what does it mean and who decides what it means. I would add, and what happens if they aren't equivalent? What are the implications there? But the one that I don't know if we need to have just a separate some sort of robust sharing of information between our two boards to put a lot of intellectual thought behind this value chain aspect, because the value chain aspect does cause me great concerns. Obviously, there's a reporting issue, there's an insurance issue, and an ethics issue. Value chains information will be on the reports. It's not controlled, of course, by the reporting entity. It's overlapping with other reporting entities. And so it brings up issues with regard to how does management understand the validity of what they're reporting? How do assurance providers get satisfied that it's appropriate to put the assurance on? And then ethically, you know, from an independent standpoint or from an internal standpoint, what does that mean? And it's a kind of a new world, and it would be terrific if there was a integration, I like that word, of at least thought or synergistic of sharing, because these are very significant issues that I think could be some C-level with regard to the new world of value chain, which is wholly different than items coming out of the internal control systems of reporting entities. So those are the quality management value chains are the ones that concern me greatly.
Yeah, on that topic yesterday, we had quite a bit of discussion, and the idea, maybe Josephine, I'll call upon you to give a little texture about it, and the sense of as you get further away outside the corporate entity, further down the value chain, how it's difficult to have like a binary of yes or no. It's that, and how does that fit with current constructs that we have in our standards? Josephine, I don't know if you have any.
No, that's right in terms of value chain. But so the only thing I would add there, Andy, yesterday, in terms of the quality management principles and ethical principles, and some of this issue we have with what does it mean at least as demanding, it still came through very loud and clear that everybody supported that was the right thing, which is really, you know, and that's the key. So we those foundational principles are still critical. And that was from, you know, the group one, which is the practitioners, whether or not from an audit firm, and the group two, which were the investor preparer community as well. So absolutely behind it, but you just need to help us understand what is this at least as demanding, and to your point, what if it isn't, and who's monitoring that and enforcing that. So it's good.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kai Martin from the IAASB. As a general comment, I very much support the boards seeking to cooperate on projects. And coming back, Tom, to your question, whether there's any lessons which we have learned from the current IAASB-IESBA sustainability project. I think there's one main lesson I would take, that there is a kind of need to be early consultation on fundamental issues that affect both boards. So for example, definitions, if I'm informed rightly, this issue has been also raised by the CACs. Thanks.
Thank you. Diane?
So to the question of what keeps me up at night, I think I heard yesterday a good discussion about the ethical standards, same comments that have already been said, so I won't repeat that. The other one is independence. I think as this reporting evolves and there's varying levels of knowledge, I'll just leave it at that, that the role of the auditor, and are they truly independent and they're not in a position where they are helping to compile or helping to lead or helping to prepare disclosures. I think it can get a bit, there's a risk perhaps that could get gray as companies are looking for expert advice And does that expert advice come from the person who's then going to put an opinion on that? So I do think thinking about independence and clear separation of responsibility might be also something to noodle on, as we say. Thanks.
Our noodler in chief of our board, Isabel.
Yes, hello everybody. So on this topic of sustainability, ethics, independence, and assurance matter are really interconnected. And we could see that yesterday in the roundtable we had, but it's also true in the questions that people are asking me on sustainability assurance every day. So in this kind of gathering, the one we have here today together, the great thing is that we can try to think out of the box. And I was thinking on the example of what we did in France at the time of COVID. So many questions were occurring all over the place. And we had the joint frequently asked questions from several boards. And we had ethical questions, we had the legal questions, we had the risk questions, we had the assurance questions, all together in the same set of frequently asked questions. So why not, when all projects will be finalized, to try to reach out to our stakeholders with common frequently asked questions or common guide, because everybody is asking for guides and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks very much. And firstly, I probably should have stepped in earlier to just recognise that as chair of the PI task force, I appreciate the coordination and the work from Sung Nam and Jeff and the team. It's really added, and we've been able to, I think, work very effectively together in that kind of way. In relation to sustainability, I had a couple of observations really. Firstly, is that in such an evolving area, we are both trying to reach out to quite different stakeholder groups than perhaps we've traditionally been engaging with, and getting to those people is quite hard. And I just wondered whether there's more opportunity for us to genuinely do that jointly. Because if we can reach out to those people, we should take advantage of the opportunity to present a range of questions. And then I think one of my takeaways from the roundtables we had yesterday was there's obviously a desire for lots more guidance in all kinds of areas. And I do think there's probably an opportunity there. I think what Isabel was saying about joint FAQs, again, it's the same people who are asking the same questions. So we could work on that together. And I also felt that whole piece around the value chain is it touches everything that we all do, and is difficult. So that could be an opportunity as well. Thanks.
Mark.
Thank you. Very much support Isabel's comment about joint FAQs and tying it together. However, in an attempt to take a pot shot at the elephant in the room, joint FAQs are probably best issued if we both issue our standards at the same time and not at different points in the year, because it doesn't look very joined up.
Yeah.
I just have a similar point. So you mentioned we have a different stakeholder group now, who sometimes even do not know which is the difference between the two boards, and getting then, I would say it's coordination in appearance. So in independence in appearance issue, it's a perception issue, and we have not only to do the coordination, but also look at the perception by our stakeholders. As you said, coming twice there with similar questions from a different perspective, the timing issue. So we should also look more how we are seen by our stakeholders in the coordination process.
Yeah, this also, one of the discussions here, particularly around value chain, reminds me that it's coordination amongst us and maybe jointly, but also maybe in conjunction with reporting standard setters, whether it be IAASB or GRI or others in this space. Chana, sorry.
Thanks, Tom. So one of the things, we have a sustainability reference group at IAASB-IESBA, and one of the things that they also brought up was, whether clients will approach the auditor in the initial instance to get them ready for sustainability, and I think there's a risk there, and where the auditor might step over the line in providing that guidance to clients. So that's something to look out for. In addition to Andy's points about venture capital, the entities and the quality management, value chain entities and quality management, the other thing that at the moment we are aware that our standards are going to be a bit different is on group audits, because we will have a section on group audits. And then that raises the question, would outside stakeholders really perceive as that this as a coordinated effort? So that would be something that keeps me awake at night.
Richard?
Yes, thank you. I would want to also, Tom, reemphasize, I agree with your point about talking to the reporting standard setters, but I do think we're going to have to recognize that some of those standards are, or some of the legislation that's progressing is not pausing to have input and they seem to spend little time understanding what assurance means or independence means. They simply stick it in the requirements. And I think that's, as it relates to this area of value chain, that's particularly challenging. And so we've been working on value chain the last 24 hours, some more. I know Willie mentioned that. I wonder in turn, and by the way, there's been outstanding collaboration between the staffs of the respective boards and our liaisons throughout the process here. But I'd be curious to see if what we hear, and if we can jointly hear, what you start to see coming in your early comment letters about value chain, because this is, as Andy said, I think this is our most challenging area collectively, is how to deal with that. So thank you.
Anya?
Thank you. I think I'll be a dissonant voice in terms of value chain. I've been speaking about that quite a lot. Whenever we are discussing value chain, we are dealing with it as if from now on, companies will have full responsibility for all suppliers, for all clients, for the full report of that client. If that was the case, it would be impossible to close a report in the future and to have it assured, definitely like that. So we should be a little bit more cautious, because in the great majority of the circumstance, those suppliers are small and medium companies, are not listed companies that have no obligation at all of reporting. And if we present this as a gigantic topic, they'll be so scared that they will start creating resistance in providing information to be incorporated in the report. So we can be sensible. That's not the intention. We want to cap what is material, what is related to the business model of the company, what can affect sustainability in a material way. So we do not have answer for that, but we must have an approach that is less scaring in my view. So.
Okay, so thank you for that. I think value chain clearly is an area that we need to noodle over a little bit more, Diane. And there are a number of good inputs here that we've been taking copious notes on, and certainly will reflect. Before we have, that was sort of the last of the, yeah. Gabrielle.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment on my side. Thank you very much for these very interesting and rich comments. I just would like to add One thing, Ken mentioned the fact that we are also developing ethics standards for sustainability reporting. We are aware that this is probably not an area where that will require direct and immediate coordination between the two boards, but it should be taken as a background for all the work that the IASBA is doing, and that may translate into some options that by themselves need coordination with the IAASB. And one of the cases is definition. So this is just to raise awareness that our scope is not exactly the same. We have a different scope, and some of the decisions that we are making and options may be led by the fact that we have a different scope. Second topic, more high level, is that this coordination is important for all reasons that have been mentioned here. Most important one is for the quality of the projects and their ability to meet the public interest, but from a more methodological or procedural, if I may say so, perspective. This also helps, I think, the PIOB to have a more integrated vision and understanding of what both boards are doing. There are a lot of situations that the PIOB will have to address at a certain moment and for certain purposes. And it's important that they are allowed to have an integrated vision of the projects or the decisions of the two boards or whatever happens, because of course this simplifies their life, but the main purpose is that they have the entire and clear understanding of what we are doing together. Thank you.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to turn to is our two CAG chairs that are here and see if they've observed the coordination evolve over the years and have had conversations in recent times with the CAGs to that have touched on our coordination efforts. If you have any observations, Jim or Galen.
Thanks, Tom. I think my observation is a lot of the issues, and I'm also on the IASBA CAG, that we're dealing with in terms of sustainability. Some of the others, we're seeing more coordination, and there is the need to have that coordination because there's so many related topics that cross over. So I think we're seeing some of that progress, and this meeting would be a good example of that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. And I couldn't agree more with Jim on that. I've been a member of the both CAGs for quite some time, and as we see them come to an end over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, really been sort of a paradigm shift in terms of the way we've been thinking, or what I've been observing about the interaction of the two boards, and as these issues have bubbled up to the surface, and especially those that are touchy, sticky, difficult to deal with, that there has been much a better coordination, and I think that is a real compliment, not only the boards but also the staff that supports them. Thank you.
I note that we have not 1, not 2, but 3 PIOB members in the room. Robert, welcome. Hope your journey was good, but I don't know, Janine or Tom, if you have any observations, because the PIOB clearly has encouraged us over the years to enhance our integration of activities together.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's very good to see both boards here in the same room. It's the first opportunity that I have that. And I like to commend both boards with this coordination session to align work efforts and any projects and work streams which may require a joint effort and coordination, and projects overlapping, particularly around sustainability. A very good idea shared, how coordination and cooperation could be strengthened further in general, but also specifically for sustainability work, as was just discussed, and to address with a view to enhance effectiveness of important public interest issues in standard setting, which is of course
the aim of what we're all trying to achieve collectively. So thank you very much. It was very good.
I just would like to very brief, and then I'm really encouraged to see that discussion in this plenary, because there are two very big issues in the IAASB we have discussed according in terms of the sustainability. The one is a definition, and then I think that's the sustainability information definition is very, very important starting point, and my colleagues of the PIOB is insisting it should be identical. But at the same time, we understand that the definition has different objectivity, but at the same time that the two boards are presenting at the same time. So that sort of the coordination is a key. And then I think that's the discussion between two boards are very encouraging. That's the first point. And the discussion concerning the value chain is a sort of the, I can say, I'm relieved to hear that it is a big issue for the IAASB as well. And then we did have quite a lot of discussion in IAASB-IESBA as well. And then we would like to continue this sort of the coordination. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're just a little ahead of schedule, but I think that's a sign of the agility that we're displaying as two boards right now. But I personally want to thank everyone. I know it's been a long week for both boards, but the discussion has been really insightful and useful from my perspective. And I'm going to turn it over to Gabriella to close the session.
Thank you, Tom. I don't have much more to add for the years, but it's still being a long week because we still have a few things ahead of us today and tomorrow. So it's been a very packed and intense week, but nevertheless, this was a wonderful opportunity for many reasons. Also to break a little bit the pace of our works at the IASBA level, but of course, because of the coordination and collaboration that this helps a lot. I don't know, I would not like to close the session without asking that if anyone, because we drove you into these two topics of strategy and work plan and sustainability, if there is anything with respect to these topics or any other that you think you should, which is of relevance for the two boards and strategic enough to be raised here, of course, we still have time. Otherwise, Christelle, please.
How do you intend to come back to the boards with after digesting what was shared here?
I think that we don't have a formal process in that respect, but of course this will be digested as you say, and I hope translated into action. More than coming back to the board, of course we will report what happened and what changed, following up on the recommendations and questions and comments of these two boards. But of course, I think that this should translate mostly in concrete actions and concrete behaviors of the two boards. Walking the talk is, of course, critical for many reasons, because it's what allows us to use these very valuable moments to work in a better way and provide better results, but also because it's a matter of credibility of the boards if we to stick to this compromise, to this commitment to coordination. We really take it seriously. I can't resist but telling you that IASBA, we really take coordination even internally very seriously. And if you look at me and Laurie, my vice chair, you can see that we always coordinate. Every morning we have a call to make sure that we are coordinated. So of course, I'm not speaking seriously, but it happens all the time.
I thought that was the real elephant in the room. We were wondering whether there was something going on that we missed. Josephine and I suggested that we should start coordinating.
You're not bad, you're not bad. So thank you very much to all of you. If there are no other comments, if anyone from Tom, from the staff, or whoever wants to say something, of course, come in. Otherwise, we can.
Yeah, no, it's only to confirm to our two boards here that we will basically digest the input we have collected today at the staff level. And I certainly will be coordinating with my counterpart, Billy, across OR, as it were. And my certainly my expectations is that at least on the IASBA side, and really maybe you can we can have a discussion, is that we will come back to our board in December with an indication of steps we're going to take or action plans we're going to put in motion in terms of some of the suggestions or ideas we picked up today.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ken. And I was also thinking, I think both our boards also have planning committee meetings coming up, and we will certainly, as a planning committee meeting on the IAASB side, also reflect on what we hear today, which I think will inform any type of feedback as well.
Thank you, Ken and Willy. Thank you to all those who are involved in the preparation of this session. And this is not a minor element and factor, because it takes a lot of work. We hope it's going to be very useful. Thank you, Tom, as well, and everybody. And have a nice day. I don't know if you're still meeting on the IAASB side. We are moving to ICK and hope to see you soon. Oh, thank you.
Okay, we'll close in the public session. We just have a couple of administrative items, particularly relevant to the IAASB. The broadcast off.